we have our scene properly set up for poly painting, let's apply some basic poly painting techniques to quickly bring this character to life with color. So with my character coming from the ocean, I want to stick to some primarily blue or green hues for now. So I'll go in and set my main color to a blue tone that I like, and also set my secondary color to a green tone in order to easily switch between two colors if needed. I can start laying in some foundations of green for the skin with a standard brush. Changing my draw size to a larger value, I can paint in larger areas more quickly and start to fill in the base color here. When painting a character, often there is a layering process, applying different variations of color, as well as types of brushes that can help give a certain style or look to the paint. The standard brush has a very basic line that can be used to add detail lines in areas like the eyes, or maybe in areas around the teeth. But first, I would like to paint in more general foundations of this base skin color. In order to do this, I'm going to change the stroke of the brush. In the stroke palette here, the dot stroke type is the default type for some brushes, which gives us the current effect of the brush application on the surface. If we click open the stroke palette, there are other stroke types we can adjust to change or speed up this process. In this case, let's use the color spray and the spray stroke to help us. First, let's try out the color spray. When applying this poly paint on the character with this stroke, this will apply a variation of blended colored dots to the surface, following closely to the selected main color, and start to change those colors further on the color spectrum. In the stroke menu, we also have stroke modifiers for even further control. In the case of this color spray stroke, by adjusting the color variance slider here to a higher level, we can allow for even broader variations of color and create this rainbow effect. You can continue to play with these settings as you progress with the stroke adjustments, but for now let's keep things simple and stick to the default settings. Changing the draw size larger while poly painting with this stroke will have a larger and broader selection of spray dots on the surface. Changing the draw size smaller will have smaller and more focused spray dots of color. Finding an average medium draw size between the two, I can quickly apply a more classical and painterly selection of colors very easily. With a different color selected in my secondary color option, I can now press Alt and apply a different color to these areas with the same effect. Next, I'll select the spray stroke. When applying this brush on the character, this will work very similarly to the color spray stroke, but will have less variation in color and instead will apply high and low levels of saturation based on our main selected color option here. Changing the color intensity of this stroke will only increase the application of these spray dots and will not affect the color variation like the color spray stroke. As I want to maintain my stylized character look with brighter selections of color, I'm going to continue to use the color spray stroke for this process. As you develop your own poly painting process, you can continue to play with these strokes and their settings to find the effect you're looking for. Looking at different patterns of color on different types of sharks, as sharks spend most of their time swimming horizontally for stealth purposes, there is a variation of color on the top and bottom for camouflage. For the front, I'm selecting a lighter tone of green and laying down in that general area, and then applying a slightly darker hue of green to accentuate this a bit further. I can continue to break up these colors and really lay in a solid foundation of color before moving on to refining the smaller details. I now want to quickly start adding some secondary details. To do this, let's modify the brush a bit further and apply an alpha to the brush. Alphas allow us to apply a focused shape or stencil to the mesh based on the selected stroke type. To demonstrate, I'm going to change my stroke to the drag rectangle. This will allow me to apply an alpha by dragging it onto the mesh. For this example, I'll select a red color to help see the alpha more clearly, and let's open up the alpha palette. Here we have a large selection of various alphas to choose from. By clicking on any one of these alphas, this will add it to the alpha palette. Now click and draw on the mesh, and we can apply the alpha to the surface and let go of your cursor. Using alphas with the drag rectangle stroke can add new levels of application of PolyPaint when adding things like logos, tattoos, scars, or many other kinds of details we may want to add with PolyPaint. Changing the stroke back to the color spray stroke will apply this alpha image to the spray stroke dots on the mesh, allowing me to spray this alpha. Using this further, I want to use the color spray stroke while changing the alpha to have an added level of control with the spray on the surface. So I'll quickly undo those actions, and I'm going to select a simple small dot alpha, in this case alpha 47. With the color spray stroke, and by using the small alpha, we'll focus the spray dots to the size of this alpha, allowing for more refined polypainting strokes. I can now switch to the spray stroke, and you can see that this will have a stronger intensity. Now, this stroke is no longer adding variations on the full color spectrum, and is still adding variations of saturation or lighter and darker tones of this color. I want to control this a bit further and have a more focused selection of color with less variation. In this case, I'll adjust the color intensity variation slider for this stroke to be much lower, and now you can see we can control the color application much more to what I'm looking for. You can see by using both types of spray strokes, as well as choosing an alpha, we can change the way we add polypaint to the surface and develop a basic technique to add polypaint to the character. One final thing I would like to add are some stripes. For this, I'm going to choose a different color. I can now switch back to the dot stroke by clicking Open the Stroke menu and selecting it. While going in to paint these stripes, the alpha is still selected, which is making my paint application much smaller. For now, I want to turn this alpha off by selecting it to open up the alpha palette, and select the alpha off option here to turn this alpha off. Now I can continue using the standard brush settings and paint an outline for a stripe on the fin, and then fill in these areas. A quicker way to polypaint certain areas like this is to use the masking brushes. For this, I'll rotate to the side view. Pressing and holding Control, I'll select the Mask Lasso brush. Exactly as they work while sculpting on the character, masking brushes will also protect areas when applying polypaint and allow us more control when painting in target areas and also protecting others from being painted on. Turning off perspective will help make a clean mask selection from this angle, and I can use this masking brush to select areas where I would like to paint in these stripes on the character. Once I've got the mask drawn in, I'll inverse the mask, now adjusting my draw size larger, and I can go in to start to paint these areas much more quickly, and then clear my mask, and then scale in if needed to focus on these target areas to paint around these shapes. Following these techniques, I've been able to paint in all areas of the character with a nice breakup of color while using strokes and alphas to modify the brush for more refined levels of control. We hope this will give you ideas on how to develop your own polypainting workflow and continue to play with these settings as you progress. To finish off this series, in the next video, we'll be discussing painting with color and materials for the eyeballs, and do a final render and export a final image for you to share. Thanks for visiting Z Classroom. I'll see you in the next video.